The metallic whine of the stranded jet echoed across the empty hangar as Mike Reynolds tightened the last bolt on the engine. Sweat dripped onto the concrete despite the autumn chill. 3 months behind on rent, a daughter with medical bills, and now working overtime for a mysterious woman who'd appeared with a broken-down private jet. "Just passing through," she'd said, avoiding eye contact. Mike noticed the faded designer watch, her practiced smile hiding something familiar. The same heaviness he carried. He never expected she'd return tomorrow, nor that fixing her jet would ultimately fix something in them both. Want to hear how this story unfolds? Listen to the end. Mike Reynolds' calloused fingers worked methodically over the disassembled turbine components spread across his workbench. The small regional airport in Bangor, Maine, wasn't exactly a hub for private jets, but the occasional wealthy traveler did pass through, bringing much-needed revenue to the struggling facility. Today, like most days, Mike was the only mechanic on duty, the others having gone home as the afternoon flights tapered off. The hangar lights buzzed overhead, creating pools of harsh fluorescence against the concrete floor. Mike checked his watch. 6:30. Emma would be wondering where he was. He'd promised to be home by 7 to help with her science project, but the overtime pay was too good to pass up. Single parenthood had taught him to count every dollar twice. The distant sound of jet engines drew his attention, unusual for this time of day. Mike stepped outside the hangar, squinting against the setting sun as a sleek Gulfstream G650 made an unscheduled approach. Something about the descent pattern seemed off. The pilot was compensating for something. Mike's instincts prickled. 15 years of aircraft maintenance had taught him to recognize the sound of trouble. The jet taxied to a stop, its engines whining down with an irregular stutter that confirmed Mike's suspicion. The door opened, stairs extending, and a woman emerged. Tall, poised, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Despite her composed expression, Mike caught the tightness around her eyes, the subtle tension in her shoulders. "Mechanical issues?" Mike called, approaching the aircraft. She turned, seeming almost surprised to find someone waiting. "Yes. Mid-flight warning light. The pilot managed to land safely, but..." She gestured vaguely at the jet. "Where's the pilot?" "I gave him the night off. He has family nearby." She extended her hand. "Sarah, Bennett." Her grip was firmer than he expected. Up close, Mike noticed the lines of fatigue etched around her eyes, the way her makeup had been carefully applied to hide them. "Mike Reynolds, I'm the mechanic on duty." He glanced at the jet. "I'll need to take a look at the engines. Could take a while." "How long is a while?" There was an edge to her voice that suggested time was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Won't know until I get in there." Mike studied her. Most wealthy clients would be making calls for hotel arrangements by now, maybe raging about inconvenience. Sarah Bennett stood perfectly still, as if calculating her next move with precision. "I have an important meeting tomorrow afternoon in Boston." Her voice was measured, revealing nothing. Mike nodded toward the terminal. "There's a small waiting area inside. Not fancy, but it's got coffee. I'll call when I know something." To his surprise, she shook her head. "I'll stay, if you don't mind." Mike raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. His phone vibrated in his pocket, Emma's babysitter. He turned away slightly. "Mrs. Davis, everything okay?" The elderly neighbor's voice crackled through the speaker. "Emma's asking when you'll be home. She's getting anxious about her project." Mike closed his eyes briefly. "Tell her I'm working on something important. I'll make it up to her." "She wants to speak with you." A small voice came on the line. "Dad? Are you coming home soon?" Mike's chest tightened. "Hey, sunshine, I've got an emergency repair. Might be late. But my solar system is due tomorrow." "I know, Em. Listen, how about..." He paused, struck by an idea. "How about you come here? Bring your project. I can work and help you at the same time." Emma's excitement was immediate. "Really? At the airport?" "If Mrs. Davis can drop you off." He glanced at Sarah, who was pretending not to listen. "There's a big airplane you can see." After arranging for Emma's arrival, Mike turned back to find Sarah examining the jet's exterior with surprising knowledge. "Looks like a fuel system issue," she commented. tracing a line along the wing with her finger. Mike approached, curious. You know jets? Something flickered across her face. Pride, perhaps, or nostalgia? A little. Mike opened his toolbox, selecting instruments for initial diagnostics. Well, let's see what we're dealing with. As he worked, Sarah maintained a respectful distance, but her gaze followed his movements with unmistakable understanding. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but filled with the shared language of machinery and expertise. An hour later, Mike had confirmed his suspicion. A fuel control malfunction, complicated but fixable. The parts he needed were in stock, but the repair would take most of the night. I can have it operational by morning, he told Sarah, wiping grease from his hands. Relief softened her features momentarily before her professional mask returned. Thank you, I appreciate the urgency. The sound of car doors slamming announced Emma's arrival. Mike turned to see his daughter racing toward him, backpack bouncing, a half-completed solar system model clutched in her arms. Mrs. Davis followed more slowly, carrying a plastic grocery bag. Dad, is that the airplane? Emma skidded to a stop, eyes wide at the sight of the Gulf Stream. That's it. Emma, this is Miss Bennett. Her plane needs fixing. Emma regarded Sarah with undisguised curiosity. Is it broken bad? A smile, genuine this time, curved Sarah's lips. Not too bad, thanks to your dad. Mrs. Davis handed Mike the bag. Sandwiches. Figured you hadn't eaten. She lowered her voice. Don't keep her out too late on a school night. After Mrs. Davis left, Mike set up a makeshift workspace for Emma at a desk in the corner of the hangar, spreading out her solar system materials while she peppered Sarah with questions about the jet. Have you been on it lots of times? Emma asked, carefully painting Neptune blue. Sarah hesitated. Many times, yes. Dad fixes all kinds of planes. He's the best fixer ever. Emma looked up at Sarah. Do you fix things too? Huh. Sarah's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Not anymore. Mike, pretending to focus on dismantling the fuel control unit, caught the weight behind those two words. There was a story there, one that echoed his own in ways he couldn't yet define. Emma, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued painting planets. You can help me if you want. Mars still needs to be read. To Mike's surprise, Sarah set down her phone and joined Emma at the table. I think I can manage that. As Mike worked through the complex disassembly, he found himself repeatedly glancing over at the unlikely pair. Sarah's designer jacket was draped over a chair, her sleeves rolled up, a surprising transformation from corporate executive to something more authentic. Emma was demonstrating the proper way to create craters on the moon's surface using a toothpick, and Sarah was listening with complete attention. You're good with her, Mike commented later, when Emma had gone to the bathroom. Sarah looked up, startled, as if caught doing something unauthorized. She's easy to talk to, reminds me of... She stopped herself. Oh, myself a long time ago. Sarah handed him a wrench he hadn't asked for but needed. Before everything got complicated. The night deepened. Emma eventually curled up on the office couch, wrapped in Mike's spare work jacket, her completed solar system drying nearby. Mike and Sarah worked on the engine in companionable silence, her assistants becoming more confident as she remembered long-used skills. You've done this before, Mike finally said, watching her precisely adjust a valve. Sarah's hand stilled. Another lifetime ago. Pilot. She nodded, eyes fixed on the engine. My father owned a small charter company. I grew up in hangars like this, learned to fly before I could drive. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. He used to say I was born with wings instead of arms. Mike recognized the look, the same one he saw in the mirror when remembering life before it all fell apart. What happened? Life, death, corporate takeovers. Her voice hardened. My father died 5 years ago. His company became part of a larger airline. I stayed on, moved up to management, but... She shrugged, the gesture containing volumes of unspoken disappointment. But it wasn't flying, Mike finished for her. Their eyes met in silent understanding, and for a moment the pretenses between them, mechanic and executive, service provider and client, dissolved into something simpler. Just two people who had lost their way. Your turn, Sarah said quietly. What's your story? Emma mentioned it's just the two of you. Mike focused on reconnecting a fuel line, buying time. He rarely spoke about Clara, keeping that wound carefully bandaged. But something about this stranger's quiet presence made the words come easier. Car accident, 2 years ago. He checked a connection, avoiding Sarah's gaze. Emma was at school. Clara was driving to pick up birthday decorations for her. His voice caught. He cleared his throat. Drunk driver, middle of the afternoon. Sarah didn't offer platitudes or awkward sympathy. Instead, she handed him the next tool he needed, their fingers brushing momentarily. Emma seems remarkably resilient. Kids adapt. Me, I'm still figuring it out. Mike glanced at his sleeping daughter. I'm afraid of failing her. From what I've seen tonight, that seems unlikely. Sarah's voice was soft but certain. As they continued working, Mike found himself sharing more about his life with Clara, how they'd met in high school, her dreams of becoming an artist, the struggle to balance parenthood with her creative pursuits. Words he hadn't spoken aloud in 2 years flowed naturally in the quiet hangar, punctuated by the occasional clank of tools and the soft sound of Emma's breathing. She painted murals in Emma's room, Mike said, showing Sarah a photo on his phone. Clouds and birds on the ceiling, stars that glow in the dark. I couldn't bring myself to paint over them when we moved to the apartment. You shouldn't, Sarah's voice was gentle. They're beautiful. The apartment manager wasn't thrilled, but I convinced him they added value. Mike smiled faintly. Clara could convince anyone of anything. That's how she got me to ask her out in the first place. I was too shy. Sarah smiled. And now you're raising a daughter who confidently invites strangers to paint marble. That's all Clara. I'm just trying not to mess it up. As dawn approached, Mike found himself wishing the repair was more complicated, requiring more time. There was something unexpectedly comforting about working alongside Sarah, this stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Tell me about your father's company, he said, partly to keep the conversation going, partly because he genuinely wanted to know. Sarah's expression softened with pride. Bennett Airways started with one single Cessna in the 1980s. My father was a Vietnam veteran who couldn't settle for a desk job after the war. He saw how many small towns in Maine had lost their connection to the wider world and decided to change that. A regional carrier? At first. Specialized in serving communities too small for the major airlines. Places where the runway might be the only reliable way in or out during harsh winters. Sarah helped him adjust a component. By the time I joined as a pilot, we had 15 aircraft and served 26 communities across New England. Sounds like a legacy worth preserving. Something darkened in Sarah's eyes. It was. It should have been. She handed him a tool with more force than necessary. After he died, the board voted to merge with Eastern Atlantic, promised to maintain all our routes, keep our staff, typical corporate lies. Mike sensed the anger beneath her controlled exterior. And now? Now I sit in meetings while men in expensive suits explain why cutting service to rural communities is optimizing resource allocation. Her voice was bitter. My father built that airline to serve people, not profit margins. Mike was about to respond when his phone rang. The airport manager, calling earlier than usual. Mike, we've got a problem with the morning commuter. Can you check it before the passengers arrive? Mike glanced at Sarah's jet, nearly repaired but still requiring final assembly. I'm in the middle of... It's the Boston connection. If it doesn't fly, 40 people miss their connections. Mike sighed. Give me 20 minutes. He ended the call, turning apologetically to Sarah. I need to... Go, she said, understanding immediately. I'll watch Emma. Mike hesitated. It shouldn't take long. We'll be fine. Sarah nodded toward the sleeping child. Take your time. The commuter plane issue was minor but critical, a faulty indicator light that would have unnecessarily grounded the aircraft. By the time Mike returned to the hangar, the sun was rising, and he found Emma awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Sarah, their heads bent over a manual. And that's why the ailerons have to work together with the rudder during turns, Sarah was explaining, using a paper airplane to demonstrate. Emma noticed him first. Dad, Sarah's teaching me real pilot stuff. Is she now? Mike couldn't help but smile at his daughter's enthusiasm. Sarah looked almost embarrassed, setting the paper airplane aside. Just the basics. She knows everything about flying, Emma declared, even more than you. Mike raised an eyebrow at Sarah. High praise from my daughter. Sarah stood, smoothing her rumpled clothing with a self-conscious gesture. How's the commuter? Fixed. Now let's finish your jet. As Mike worked on the final assembly, his phone rang again. Sarah's expression changed as she glanced at her own buzzing phone. Corporate vultures circling already? Mike asked, only half joking. Sarah's mouth tightened as she checked her messages. Board meeting moved up to 9 this morning. Apparently my absence has created an urgent situation requiring immediate address. Meaning? Meaning they're trying to vote while I'm not there. Her composure slipped, revealing raw frustration. 3 years of fighting to maintain my father's vision, and they wait until I'm stranded in Bangor to make their move. Mike accelerated his work, feeling the pressure of her deadline. As he moved to install the final component, a critical seal slipped from his fingers, falling into an inaccessible recess of the engine. Problem? Sarah asked, noting his expression. Need a replacement seal. Without it, the repair won't hold. He checked his watch. Parts department doesn't open until 8. But the board meeting is at 9. Sarah's carefully maintained control began to fray. I have to be there. I have to. Her voice broke, and suddenly she was no longer the composed executive. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, 15 years of holding everything together finally giving way. Mike stood frozen, uncertain. He was accustomed to fixing mechanical problems, not human ones. A small voice came from behind them. Dad? Why is she crying? Emma had approached, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Before Mike could respond, Emma did what children do best. Acted on pure instinct, she walked to Sarah and took her hand. It's okay to be sad. Dad cries sometimes too, when he thinks I'm asleep. Sarah looked at Emma, then at Mike, something shifting in her expression. She knelt to Emma's level. Something important to me is breaking. I'm scared I can't fix it. Emma considered this with 9-year-old wisdom. Dad says sometimes broken things just need someone patient enough to understand them. Mike felt a tightness in his throat. His own words, repeated in his daughter's innocent voice, landing with unexpected weight. In that moment, Mike made a decision. There's a way. He turned to his toolbox, searching through a small drawer of specialized parts. It's not standard procedure, but I can modify a similar seal to fit. Is that safe? Sarah asked, wiping away tears with embarrassment. Not FAA approved for commercial flights, but for a private jet? It'll hold until you can get a proper replacement. He hesitated. It's what my father would have done. Understanding passed between them. Both children of practical men who found solutions where others saw only problems. As the morning light streamed through the hangar windows, Mike completed the improvised repair. Testing confirmed what he already knew. It would work. Some problems had solutions if you were willing to think differently, to adapt. Emma's solar system had dried overnight, the planets hanging in perfect alignment. Sarah helped her pack it carefully for school, while Mike finished his paperwork. I should take you both home before I leave, Sarah offered. You've been up all night. Mike was about to refuse. He had never been comfortable accepting help, but Emma's hopeful expression stopped him. That would be nice. Thank you. But there were things that went on doing unseen. The ride to their apartment was quiet, Emma dozing in the back seat of the rental car Sarah had arranged. When they arrived, Mike expected a quick goodbye, but Sarah accepted his awkward invitation for coffee with surprising readiness. Their small apartment told the story Mike never would. Photos of Clara still prominently displayed, Emma's aviation books stacked on every surface, bills organized in careful piles on the kitchen counter, a life carefully maintained but incomplete. Sorry about the mess, Mike said, hastily gathering yesterday's dishes from the coffee table. Wasn't expecting company. Sarah shook her head. It feels like a home. There was something wistful in her voice that made Mike wonder about where she lived, what kind of space she returned to at day's end. As Emma showed Sarah her bedroom, proudly pointing out the model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. Mike overheard Sarah explaining the principles of flight with the ease of someone who had once lived and breathed aviation. "This one's broken," Emma said, showing Sarah a model with a damaged wing. "May I?" Sarah took the model, examining it with knowing hands. "The wing strut just needs realignment, see?" Her fingers gently pressed the piece back into place. "Sometimes what seems broken is just disconnected." Mike brought coffee to find them seated on Emma's bed, surrounded by aviation books. Sarah was showing Emma a photo on her phone, a younger version of herself in a pilot's uniform, standing beside a small propeller plane. "Is that your airplane?" Emma asked, wide-eyed. "It was my first, a Cessna 150. My father taught me to fly in it when I was 16. His dad won't let me fly until I'm at least 12, Emma said with dramatic disappointment. Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "Your dad is wise, plenty of time to learn." "Did you know Dad was almost a pilot too?" Emma looked at Mike. "Show her your pictures, Dad." Mike hesitated, then retrieved a photo album from the bookshelf. He rarely looked at these reminders of his former life, but Emma's enthusiasm left him little choice. Sarah examined a photo of Mike in his Air Force uniform, standing beside an F-16. "Crew chief? How did you know?" "The insignia." She studied the image. "You wanted to fly, though." "It wasn't a question," Mike nodded. "Color blindness disqualified me from pilot training. Still, I got to keep them in the air. That counted for something." Sarah's fingers traced the edge of the photograph. "It more than counted. Pilots get the glory, but we're nothing without the people who keep us flying." She looked up at him. "My father said the best mechanics are the ones who can feel what's wrong with an aircraft before the instruments even register it." Mike recognized the words, a common sentiment among aviation veterans, but the way Sarah said it made it sound like a personal compliment, rather than a platitude. Their eyes met over the photo album, and for a moment, Mike felt something shift between them, a recognition that went beyond their brief acquaintance. Two people who understood the peculiar mixture of freedom and responsibility that came with flight. The moment was broken by Emma's yawn. Despite her protests, exhaustion was catching up with her. "You should get some sleep before school," Mike said, closing the album. "But I want to stay with Sarah." Sarah smiled, gathering her belongings. "I have to leave anyway, Em. That meeting, remember? Will you come back?" Emma's question hung in the air, innocent yet loaded. Sarah glanced at Mike, something uncertain in her expression. "If that's okay with your dad." Mike found himself nodding before he could overthink it. "Of course." At the door, Sarah checked her watch, a vintage Breitling that had seen better days. "Thank you. For the repair, the coffee, everything." "Just doing my job," Mike said, then immediately regretted the formality. Sarah seemed to hesitate, as if wanting to say more, but instead simply squeezed his hand briefly. "I hope the seal holds." They both knew she wasn't just talking about the jet. After she left, Mike put Emma to bed despite her protest that she wasn't tired. Within minutes she was asleep, still clutching the model plane Sarah had fixed. Mike himself couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to Sarah Bennett, her controlled exterior and the glimpses of passion beneath, the way her hands had moved confidently over the engine components, remembering skills long unused. He wondered about the board meeting, whether she'd arrived in time, whether she'd managed to preserve what remained of her father's legacy. He didn't expect to ever know. People like Sarah Bennett moved in different orbits, their paths crossing his only by chance and necessity. He was wrong. That afternoon, after dropping Emma at school and catching a few hours of restless sleep, Mike returned to the airport. The familiar routine of checking maintenance logs and inspecting aircraft did little to dispel his distraction. Every passing jet made him look up, though he told himself it was ridiculous to expect her return. He was examining a hydraulic issue on a commuter plane when he heard Emma's voice. He turned, surprised to see his daughter racing across the tarmac from Mrs. Davis's car, school backpack still on her shoulders. Dad, she's back. Her plane is back." Mike looked up to see the familiar Gulf Stream taxiing toward the hangar. His heart performed an unexpected maneuver that would have concerned him in an aircraft. Emma reached him, breathless with excitement. "Mrs. Davis picked me up early because I told her it was important airport business." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Important airport business?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Very important." The jet came to a stop and the door opened to reveal Sarah, no longer wearing yesterday's rumpled suit, but a crisp white shirt and dark pants that somehow looked more authentic, more like the woman who had fixed Emma's model plane than the executive who had arrived the previous evening. She approached them with a new energy in her step, smiling at Emma's enthusiastic wave. "The seal held perfectly," she said by way of greeting. "In the meeting?" Mike asked, trying to sound casual. A smile, triumphant but tempered, spread across her face. "I arrived just in time, and I had an unexpected advantage." She reached into her bag, producing documents. "My father left me personal shares I hadn't known about. Our corporate counsel found them while reviewing his estate. Again, after I called from your apartment this morning. Combined with my existing stake, it gave me controlling interest. So you won. I reclaim what matters." Her expression softened. "And I've made some decisions about the company's future, including establishing a proper maintenance facility here in Bangor." Mike stared at her, processing the implication. "Here? This region needs reliable air service. The previous board cut too many essential routes." She handed him a business card, newly printed, reading Bennett Regional Airways with her name as CEO. "And I need a head of maintenance I can trust, someone who understands that sometimes the unconventional solution is the right one." Mike took the card, turning it over in his fingers. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership." Sarah's eyes held his. "My father built his company with people who shared his vision, that flying isn't just about getting from one point to another, but about connecting communities, creating possibilities." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." Emma, who had been following the conversation with intense concentration, tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Does that mean you'll visit us again?" "If that's all right with your dad." Sarah's gaze remained on Mike, a question in her eyes that went beyond job offers and business arrangements. Before Mike could respond, Emma pressed a folded paper into Sarah's hand. "I made this for you." Sarah opened it to reveal a crayon drawing of 3 figures standing beside an airplane. Beneath it, in a child's careful handwriting, co-pilots stick together. Sarah and Lawrence stuck together. "Emma, that's..." Mike began, embarrassed by his daughter's presumption. "Perfect," Sarah finished, her voice catching. "Absolutely perfect." She carefully folded the drawing and placed it in her pocket near her heart. "I have another meeting in Portland this evening, but I'll be back tomorrow. There's a lot to discuss if you're interested in the position." "I am," Mike said, surprising himself with his certainty. "Very interested." Sarah nodded, glancing at her watch. "I should go. The pilot is waiting." "You're not flying?" Something sparkled in Sarah's eyes. "Not today, but soon." She knelt to Emma's level. "And when I do, maybe you and your dad would like to come along. Just a short hop." Emma's eyes widened. "For real flying? In the air?" "For real flying," Sarah stood, her gaze returning to Mike. "What do you say, Mr. Reynolds? Ready for some new horizons?" Mike looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Sarah. This woman, who had walked into his hangar less than 24 hours ago, and somehow changed the flight path of his carefully controlled life. "I think we could manage that." As Sarah walked back to her jet, Emma slipped her small hand into Mike's. "I like her, Dad. She fixes things, like you do." Mike watched the Gulfstream taxi away, feeling something unfamiliar expanding in his chest. Not quite hope, not quite excitement, but something adjacent to both. A sense of possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider for a very long time. "Yeah, sunshine. I think she does." The next day, as promised, Sarah returned. This time, Mike was ready, waiting on the tarmac as her jet touched down. Emma was in school, but her presence lingered in the carefully wrapped model airplane Mike had helped her select from her collection. A peace offering, a connection, a possibility. "You came back," he said as Sarah descended the stairs. "I said I would." She smiled, taking in his freshly pressed shirt, the absence of engine grease beneath his fingernails. "You're not working today? Took the day off, thought you might want a tour of Bangor, if you have time." Sarah checked her watch, not the executive gesture of someone measuring out minutes, but the relaxed movement of someone considering possibilities. "I think I can make time." As they walked toward his waiting truck, Mike handed her Emma's model plane. "From Emma. She thought you should have your own." Sarah accepted the gift, cradling it with unexpected tenderness. "I haven't had a model plane since I was a girl. Never too late to start a collection." She looked up at him, the morning sun illuminating her face, no longer tired or guarded but open with a cautious kind of joy. "No, I suppose it isn't." They stood for a moment on the tarmac, the autumn sun warming their faces, illuminating possibilities neither of them had considered just 48 hours earlier. Mike thought about the broken seal, the improvised solution that had held. Some repairs couldn't be seen from the outside, but they made flight possible all the same. "So," he said finally, "where should we begin?" Sarah's smile deepened, reaching her eyes in a way that transformed her entire face. "I think we already have." Together they walked away from the hangar, two silhouettes against the vast Maine sky, connected by something stronger than chance, more enduring than machinery. The quiet certainty that healing begins when we allow others to see our broken parts and help us find the missing pieces. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about healing, connection, and the unexpected ways we find our way back to ourselves.